All right. Welcome back, guys, to our last Thursday night book review for The Souls of Paradise. If it's your first time joining us tonight, I am indie author Nick Belisi. I wrote The Souls of Paradise, and every Thursday for the last 9 weeks, we have been going over the book and giving you guys Easter eggs and stuff like that about it. We have finally made it to the last 2 chapters of the book. So, to get us started tonight, like I said, we've been doing this 9 weeks now. And next week we're going to be going into the other book, but for this week at least, we're going to finish up this one. So, where we left off last time, we saw that Dr. Clark and Stella had their moment. They had their fight. The Bronze Angel was turning into, Dr. Clark. Stella was losing it, and she winds up eventually defeating the monster with the help of Cecile, and then they go together hand in hand to go seek out their father before it all goes black. Now, chapter 20. Okay? Where is my mind? Stella finds herself locked up and bound in a padded room. She could see Betty and a doctor on the other side of the door, but no one will help her despite her pleas. Dr. Drew and Betty explain what happened to each other until Detective Hunt walks up and explains his side of it with, the police's side. And then, as they're talking and stuff like that, Detective Hunt, gets a realization about the PC-3 being in Stella's system and not knowing what it was. Then at that point he decides that he wants to go back to where Dr. Clark is held up in the ICU and ask her about why she was prescribing Stella this PC-3. So that's where we left off with that. Now, when I was envisioning this, no, I am not Adam Sandler. When I was envisioning this, like the old school padded room, like that I described in the story and stuff like that, basically what happened was I was thinking about like Twisted Metal Black. And if you notice, like in the early cutscenes and stuff like that, you kind of see like each one of the characters in like that style of the padded room in the asylum. That's kind of what I was envisioning in my head when I put Stella in there. So that was like really the only, the only Easter egg in that chapter. It's more of like a coming together. You have to really read it to understand that, Stella, when she like saw all this stuff, now all of a sudden she's like in a padded room. Like, how did she get there? Why is she like that? What's going on? And then you hear, Dr. Drew and then Nurse Betty talking to each other about like how, Stella had broken into her doctor's office. She lost a lot of blood when she cut herself, and she kind of fell apart at that point. Now, you're not supposed to really know what's going on completely, but, when you get into the second book, and especially the third book, you're going to, like, piece it together a little more. It's not supposed to make sense, because you're only seeing it from Stella's point of view, and she has no idea what's going on, hence the chapter, Where is My Mind? Now, I marked something for page 211 in the book, so give me 1 second. All right. So, in page 211, it's the first talk, where we start to hear about the Angels of Mercy and, a part of the Diligent Company and stuff like that. So, Hunt is saying, he's talking about how Stella saw these things, or how they at least believed that she had seen them. So he says, yes, this is the simplest one she could think of. As you could see on Dr. Clark's apron next to her name, he's showing a picture. She has an angel pendant, which is said to be that most hospital workers also have. It's a pin the hospital gives out to members of staff who work with troubled youth. Dr. Clark would find Stella always admiring the pin. It's a constant symbol she would see, so she believes that's where the idea had come from. The name of the group that helped the troubled youth was the Angels of Mercy. And that's the very first time that we're introduced to that group, but it won't be the last time. It's actually brought up again numerous times throughout the other 2 books. I don't want to give anything away because we are diving into the second book, but we will, really get into who the Angels of Mercy are and why that's so significant. Another note to make about this is that, they're talking about PC-3. They're talking about how she was misdiagnosed. They're saying that originally she was diagnosed with borderline, and they're saying that it could be schizophrenia. or a schizo disorder. So that's something to note. Other than that, that's really all the Easter eggs there was in Chapter 20, because it's just a build-up for the end. And the end is Chapter 21, and basically, as an outline, it's called PC3, named after the medication that Stella's taking. In a nutshell, Hunt, at this point, he's going to the ICU. He's looking for Dr. Clark. He's wondering where she is, and he needs to talk to her about why she was prescribing a drug to Stella that was discontinued and never really supposed to be given out in the first place. So he gets to the ICU. He finds out that Dr. Clark had fled. She was gone. Checked herself out and everything. So Hunt's looking around. He's freaking out. He's trying to talk to the nurse, and when he speaks to the nurse, he asks her, what happened, and then that's when he is given the information about what's going on. So, as a special treat, because it is our last book read together until we start the new book, I was going to just simply read Chapter 21 to you guys. It's really not that long, but at least I can explain along the way, too, anything and answer some questions. So, Chapter 21, PC3. So, Chris Hunt made his way out of the mental health section of the Reidsville Hospital and headed to find Dr. Clark. As he made his way through the halls and into the elevator, he thought, how could this all have been possible? He wondered to himself how the doctor could have got her hands on something like this and why she would be giving it to patients. As the elevator rang, indicating it was his floor, he exited and walked down the hall of the room to which she was staying in. As Chris walked into the room, he noticed that everything, including the doctor, was gone. Frantically, he turned around to the nurse's station and he had asked, "Excuse me, do you know where the patient was that was in this room?" The nurse turns around speaking to him. "She left before she could properly check out. I told her I would be back with her blood test results, and she disappeared. I was actually about to call your office and let you know. We actually found something very interesting that I think you guys should know." So Chris goes, "Well, are you going to tell me, or should I just guess?" So the nurse turns around and says, "When we ran her blood, it popped in our system of someone who wasn't her. Her blood matched perfectly to a doctor who used to work here by the name of Olivia Reynolds. I also ran the blood on her clothes belonging to the attacker, and they are matched for genes." So it kind of gives a little hint right there. So Chris goes, "So what are you exactly saying? That the doctor wasn't who she said she was, and that she's somehow related to the girl I have locked up downstairs?" The nurse responds, "It seems to be that way. I asked some of the older staff, and they told me Olivia worked here 20 years ago, but left to work for a different company that was trying to synthesize some miracle drug." So he responds, "Would this drug be called PC3 by any chance?" And she says, "Yes. Actually, it was a really long name drug, but someone did mention it was also called PC3. So Chris goes, "I don't understand how this woman could have been running a practice and have no one piece together she wasn't who she said she was." To which the nurse responds, "I'm not sure, but I guess with being in the field for so long, she knew how to bypass all the prying eyes. She didn't have many patients from what I heard, so unfortunately it is quite possible." So then Chris says, "I have to go and find her now, so thank you for your help." He goes and leaves the room. The nurse nodded to Chris as he began to run towards the elevators. As the elevators descended to the ground floor, he tried to call into the station, but there was no service while he was in there. Frantically as ever, he paced the elevator, trying to piece together everything he just heard. He began to think that Stella must have found out about this woman being her mother, and that's how that confrontation started. He also started to think about the dead boy and Stella's father. He curiously began to question if those cases were related to Olivia and if she had something to do with it. The more questions that seemed to flood his mind made him start to feel flustered. The elevator had finally reached the ground floor and the doors slowly opened. He was already trying to get out as the doors opened. He was speeding down the hallway and headed for the exit. As he flew past the people in the hospital and made his way into the parking lot, he tried to see if he could spot her. Running from car to car, he didn't seem to find her anywhere. Frantically, he called into the station and put out an APB under the name Olivia Reynolds and Dr. Evelyn Clark. He gave a detailed description of her and told everyone to be on the lookout. Standing there wondering what to do next, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a cigar. Placing the cigar in his mouth, he then reached for his lighter. As he brought the lighter to the cigar, he thought in his mind that he couldn't shake. He thought that maybe this doctor had killed Stella's father out of some sort of revenge, and that she killed the boy Patrick for some reason. He picked up his phone and called into the police lab. After a few rings, someone answered. So Chris says, "I need the toxicology report for Thomas Morgan right now." The guy on the phone says, "The toxicology reads that he had deadly amounts of a drug called pseudochloroquine in his system. It popped up in our database, but I've personally never heard of it. The coroner had to do extensive research to even get the name of it. We still don't know what it's used for or how it's fatal in this situation. So Chris responds, I'm going to need you to pull that folder on the suicide for his daughter from a few years back. Her name's Cecile Morgan. Let me know if there's anything in her system at that time of the death. So Chris waited patiently as he could while he was trying to play out the scenario in his head. He thought Olivia had somehow drugged the father with a hot dose, which caused him to overdose. She had the perfect setup to make it look like a suicide. However, he couldn't understand why she would hurt her daughters. What sense would it make to feed them this drug? The man on the phone responds, Chris, you still there? Yeah. Have you got the file? The man goes, yes, I do. We did find the same drug in her system too. Do you think they are? Chris quickly hangs up the phone, cutting the man off mid-sentence. He couldn't believe it. He finally had the answers he needed. He threw the cigar down and headed back to the mental health ward. Overwhelmed with the answers of the puzzle that he just pieced together, he began to feel extreme guilt. He felt bad for mistreating Stella and giving her such a hard time. The impending retirement he was coming up on had clouded his judgment and made him rigid to deal with. He didn't expect in his final year to come across something like this, and his mind was already far away from this job, and it cost him the lives of all these innocent people. As he approached the elevator, he just kept playing it over and over in his mind, asking himself how he could be so stupid. As he boarded the elevator, he sat on the floor with his head in his hands and began to sob a little. The elevator had finally reached his floor, so he collected himself and headed back to where Stella was held up. As he approached Nurse Betty and Dr. Drew, who were still standing there, he quickly walked up to them and asked... So it's a lot of conversation going back and forth, so at this point, this is Chris talking. So, that Dr. Clark, after all, she was the girl's mother. She managed to drug the sister years ago and the father and also Stella. The motives why are still unclear at this point, but we have enough to apprehend her. To which Nurse Betty responds, if you have enough, then what are you doing here? By the time I got down to where she was, she had vanished. I have patrols looking for her at this very moment, and I'm hopeful we will find her. Dr. Drew chimes in and says, so it all makes sense now as to why Stella tried to attack her. She must have found out somehow, and the confrontation must have gone poorly. Nurse Betty responds, for as long as I've known Stella and her family, I've never heard of the mother being in the picture. So Chris goes, she wasn't in there from our records, and she must have eased her way back and disguised herself as someone else, and the girls must have caught on somehow, and now we see how that turned out. Nurse Betty says, this poor girl has been to hell and back. Detective, if there's anything I can do, please let me know. So Chris Hunt goes, I certainly will, and I will be monitoring the case to the very end. Dr. Drew, is Stella going to be okay? I'd really love to talk to her at this point. Dr. Drew goes, there's no way to tell for sure, but we will monitor here and do our best. So Chris says, keep me posted should her condition change and when she's stable enough to talk. I need to find out more about this company and the medication she was taking. And Dr. Drew says, yes, of course. At this point, Chris walks away and stuff like that to go do what he's doing. And Nurse Betty looks up at Chris at Dr. Lawrence and goes, do you think she even knows that she's not actually crazy? And Dr. Lawrence Drew says, there's no way to know for certain, Betty. At least for now. All we can hope is that she finds a little paradise. So at the end there, it kind of gives that little, like, cliffhanger, because by him saying, like, finding paradise and stuff, that was the whole motive of the Diligent Company and stuff like that, and the drug PC3, is that it would give the user a feeling of being in paradise once they wiped all the trauma away. So it's kind of like that little teaser at the end to show that he's somehow involved, and this goes a lot deeper than, we initially thought. Now, next week, when we go on to our next book review, we are going to be jumping into Paradise Reborn, which is my absolute favorite. There's so many Easter eggs in it. I think when I was talking to Stormy and stuff like that, I think we're going to stick to the one, maybe 2 chapters if I can get it done, just because they're so long and so extensive. There's going to be so much stuff to talk about. If you haven't picked up the book, you could always jump on Amazon and check it out there and pick it up. It's only 99 cents for the Kindle, and then obviously for the hardcover and stuff like that, it is a little more expensive just because of printing costs and such. If you are first time joining us here tonight, you can go onto our YouTube channel, The Paradise Collection, and you can get caught up with all the Easter eggs now that we finally have hit the conclusion of the Souls of Paradise. We finally hit the end. it meant so much to me to get that story out there and get it published and everything. I had been working on it. I know I've mentioned this in prior videos, but I started working on it as a school project when I was in the Art Institute of Pittsburgh, and it kind of manifested. It was initially supposed to be a video game, but that plan kind of fell through. So at that point, we went and took it in a different or I took it in a different direction, and I started creating it to be a novel. It was something I always wanted to do, and I finally did it. So when I was given advice on how to publish and stuff like that through Amazon and KDP, I took the leap, I got it published, and it was just such an amazing feeling. And although Paradise Reborn and stuff like that is my favorite book, The Souls of Paradise will always have a special place in my heart because, it was my first one. It was my initial leap into all this stuff. And to see how it's changed, since this all started. I mean, it's actually been just about a year. It was last October that I released that book for the first time. So it's kind of ironic that we finished reading it and we're doing a live stream and stuff like that, because I would have never imagined in my wildest dreams, a year ago when I was putting this book out for the first time, that we'd be where we are with all this. The amount of support, the amount of people that have liked the book, the amount of sales that we've gotten, the feedback, it's just absolutely incredible, and I'm so happy that so many people enjoy the book. But, we will be working closer to getting you guys more information about the new book. I know that me and Stormy have been talking about it a lot to start hyping it up a lot sooner than we did with these other books, kind of give teasers and trailers and stuff like that, and kind of get you guys more into what's going on behind the scenes. Now, I've talked about my other videos that I've done. Me and Stormy usually have story time as I finish the chapters, and she kind of gives me her feedback and stuff like that as far as, what she thinks of the story and all that. And, it keeps me motivated, it keeps me working. Like today, for example, I actually just knocked out another chapter. So every 2 days right now, I'm basically knocking out, I want to say 12 to 25 pages. So I'm on a really, really good streak right now. And in this book, like the third book I'm working on, Paradise Eternal, which will be the conclusion to this series, or the trilogy, so much is happening. There's so much to write about, and I want it to be as detailed as possible to give you guys, a clear end to the whole thing, so that there's no questions left unanswered. It's just like a very happy, well, not so happy, but like you'll feel good. You'll feel like everything was answered and it was taken care of. So I'm just being very meticulous about, making sure there's a lot of detail and stuff. And actually I have Stormy time tonight after I jump off of here, where I'm going to read her chapter 4, which is entitled Veni Vidi Vici. Or Veni Vidi Vici. So that's something to look forward to. There is going to be a point, I don't know when, but I will let you guys hear the first chapter of it as a special thing. I think I'm going to do that closer to the 1-year anniversary, which will be in a couple weeks of when I released the first book. I think it's only fair at that point, or maybe as a Halloween treat. I haven't decided yet, but I will definitely let you guys know as I figure that portion out. Now, the next time we're going to meet up is going to be next Tuesday, when we're doing our Tuesday Night Healing, where we're going to be talking about toxic relationships. We will also be talking at that point what we're going to be doing with our next 3-week schedule, which I have written down, but I will release that information next week. If you guys want to join us, you want to talk about toxic relationships you've been, give examples, or just even, be on the live chat or ask questions, you can always direct message me if you don't want to post them in the chat here, and I will answer them as they come up. But if you want to, let me know, and we would love to have you on. We are looking for more guests and stuff like that to jump on and interact with us, so that way we can get all different sides of what's going on with these different subjects. For now, that is all I have. I want to thank you guys so much for following along, those who have for the last 9 weeks. It was a lot of putting information out and stuff like that, and writing down all the Easter eggs and stuff like that so I could share that with you. And the next project, Paradise Reborn, it's just so much. I really put like my heart and soul into that book, so there's just so much to talk about. And I mean, the first chapter alone, anyone who's read it can attest to, it's a very, very heavy emotional chapter just to start the book off. We do change gears a little bit when it comes to that book. We have a new main character, obviously, because of where we left off with this book. You know, Stella's in the padded room and stuff, but Paradise Reborn actually follows the story of a new main character named Gwen Murphy. And Gwen, you know, is going through her own problems and stuff like that, and she's related to the whole Reedsville scene and everything, which we will hear about next Thursday. I'll dive into that, but, you know, like I said, if you want to get a head start and figure out what's going on, you can certainly jump on Amazon and stuff like that and check the book out for 99 cents. Other than that, I don't have anything for you guys. I'm excited to